Hello, welcome. This is Lights Up Through the Lens. My name is Andrew Keeton. I'm going to be walking you through a little bit of animation using one of my favorite programs in the world, Scratch. What's cool about Scratch is that it's free. Well, that's one of the cool things about Scratch. It was created by the people who invented Legos and MIT. You may have heard of them, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the best regarded schools in the nation when it comes to technology. And the marriage of their two ideas on how to make a program for beginners to understand code is applicable to creating video games. It's applicable to creating little animation stories, which is what I've done here today. And it's got some limitations, but it is a wonderful place to start your journey into understanding animation, understanding code. It's something that I would recommend for anyone between 4 years old and 104 years old. If you're 105, you could play with it and enjoy it too. There's so much cool stuff you can do there. It's not the most robust. There are little things that as you become more interested in sophisticated animation, you're going to want to look at another program like After Effects or something like that eventually. But this is a perfect place to cut your teeth and learn the fundamental concepts. Let's take a look at what I've created here.
A young bear was walking through the forest and found a hollow log where bees had made their home. The bear carefully and quietly started to extract the honey. Just then, a worker bee was making his way home from the flowers with nectar to be made into honey. The bee bravely charged the bear. Though his sting was small, the bee's attack enraged the hungry bear. The bear's angry roaring alerted the rest of the hive. The moral is that anger makes bad situations worse.
All right, cool. Hope you enjoyed that. It's fun, it's cute. It took a little while to put together. So if your first project doesn't turn out anything like this, don't let it bother you. I've been playing around with this for a very, very long time. And every time you play with it, you learn something a little bit different each time. And that's part of the process. That's what makes it fun. So let's take a look at the code that we've got here. What I've got, let's start with this. This is a sprite. What sprites are is any figure on the screen. And then we have stages or backdrops, which are our settings. One thing to keep in mind, the backdrops hold still, so you can't really scoot those back and forth. But what you can do is create multiple instances of the same background. You notice I've got forest here, and then I've got one named forest 2. That'll come in handy later. I've got meadow 2 and meadow 1. I've got a forest 3, and then I've got our wide river, which is our closing shot. And then I've got the sprites. And you'll notice in the sprites, there is a tab called costumes. And this is the way that we create kind of a walk cycle with a sprite. So we've got this static image of a bear here, but in order to make it really animate, what we have to do is change the costume on the sprite. So a sprite, think of it like an image, but it's also a container. So within the sprite, we've got bear walk A, bear walk B, bear walk C, bear walk D, E, F, G, H. All of those together, all 8 of those, make up a walking cycle. And so if I want to make it look like this bear is walking, I just tell the program to repeat the cycle of A through H, A through H, A through H. Walk cycles are really complicated, so getting something like this set up can be a little bit of a pain since you have to do it 8 different times. But once you've done it that one time, you can use that little piece of code within the sprite and repeat it infinitely without having to draw it out each time, which saves a ton of time compared to the way that we have to used to do it, where we'd have a box with a light shining from behind it, and you'd have really thin paper called onion skin that you'd have to draw really close next to it so that you could get the next panel, so you could create that same illusion that we can do with a click, saving us a lot of time. So the bear has a bunch of costumes because we have to see him walking, but the bee that I've got here just has two, just enough to flap his wings. His expression doesn't really change. You can make it as complicated as you want. You could give him as many costumes as you really feel like creating. You can create within Scratch here, or you could do it in another program like GIMP, which is also free, which I also love. Some of them, like this honey tree or the text boxes that I created, don't have any costumes at all. The swarm has an extra costume so they can flap their wings. And the angry bear, who first gets stung and his eyes get wide, stands up, gets angry, and bounces back and forth here. So you can see it's not super complicated animation, but it is the pieces of the animation, we have to set those up in advance. And thinking about the logic of how this works, setting things up in advance is a great way to make sure that your animation stays on track. Once you get into a program like this, once you see a really complicated interface with tons and tons of options on it, it's really easy to get lost in what you want to do or what you think you're doing, and you can get really tangled up if you don't make yourself a roadmap. So one thing that I always do when I get started on a project like this is my process. I put it down on paper first. So you can see I've got these tiny little thumbnails that don't really have to be very well drawn or very detailed, but it lets me know when I've got a scene and then what I'm going to need in that scene. So you might not have been able to see that too clearly, but I've got a little note there for when I want a sound effect to pop up, or when I want another character to show up, or when I want there to be a little bit of an animation there. So planning those things out in advance will make it much, much easier to deal with once you get to something as complicated as what we see when we take a look at the code associated with this bear. Okay, take a deep breath. It's not as scary as it looks. I'm going to walk you through it, just like the bear, one step at a time. So, green flag is what I click right now.
A young bear was walking through the forest and found a hollow log where bees had made their home.
And I'm going to hit the stop sign there. Green means go, start the program. The stop sign there will stop it wherever it is so we can take a closer look at it. So what happened when I clicked that green flag was that I gave a certain set of instructions to this particular sprite of the bear walking. It said when the flag is clicked, we want to make sure that the backdrop is the forest. We want to show, so these are all the looks. These are all size and shape of your images here. So show the bear and go to, which is motion, which is this blue section, go to coordinates. So coordinates are the x-axis, which is side to side, and the y-axis, which are up and down. And by default, I think it's like 600 wide on Scratch. I can't remember off the top of my head. But one thing you can do is guess and check. That's a big part of animation is how does this look? Play it back. Yeah, I need to adjust this a little bit. So what I've done is I've set it for the x coordinate at -220. So if the center of your screen is 0, right? Where is that? Yeah, 0. The center of your screen is 0, then -220 means to the left.
A young bear.
And you can see he's just a little bit off screen to start that. And then -65, same thing. So if 0 on the y-axis is dead center, then -65 means it goes down 65 pixels. So that's where our bear starts. All right. All we've done is tell it to start running the program, give us our background, give us our bear and where the bear belongs. Now we get into the section where he walks. So we have these blocks called controls. So a control tells the sprite what to do or how to do it. So we're telling it to switch the look of the sprite to costume B. So you know that's the second step that he's doing, and to move 10 steps forward. Then we switch the costume to C, wait a little while, and go another 10 steps. So what that looks like.
A young bear was walking through the forest. A young bear was walking through the forest.
If I had to make 8 of those for every step that the bear took, that would take forever. But all I've had to do is use this handy dandy control bracket that puts that whole cycle inside of it and then repeats it over and over and over again for us so that we don't have to go through that over and over again. Don't pay attention to the rest of this code. Just wait until the end of this where we've got wait 4 seconds, which is where he's staring at the log, and then switching the backdrop to the meadow. So right here we can see the backdrop has switched to the meadow. The bee was hidden up until that point. Now that we're at the meadow, we show the bee, and we start that bee buzzing sound that you hear in the background. I've also given him a direction, part of the motion, of 75 degrees, so that you can see he's kind of rising. So we've got our handy repeat here that's changing the size so that he gets a little bit bigger and changes the costume back and forth between one flap of the wings and the other. At the same time, here's what's really cool, is we've got one event happening here when the backdrop switches to the meadow. See the bee growing. We've got another set of things that happen when we switch to the meadow background. So we've got one piece of code here that's telling him to flap his wings, essentially. And then we've got another piece of code that's telling him where to go. All right, so see that directional? When I click on this, it previews the code. So you notice it's just previewing the directional code. If I preview this, it plays the music and shows the size change. When I preview this, he stays the same size and just moves in the different directions, but his wings don't flap. Click on this one, his wings flap. So when you click run the program, it does all of this at the same time. So when the backdrop switches to Forest 2, so we're in Forest 2 now, and the reason that I have all these different instances of the forest is so that I can have separate code for each of those backgrounds. If I tried to make it switch back to the original forest, some of the code that's on here might interfere with some of the other code that says, you know, to hide another object. So this is an easier way to keep track of it. We've got the sound of him buzzing happening. We've got him at a 90-degree angle, and we've told him where to begin. Now we've got telling him where to go, and when he gets to a certain place, he's going to play this little laser sound. Then he flies off, and once he gets off screen, we've got a little piece of code that tells him to hide. We've also got another section of code here that has our friendly repeater again, and it's bouncing back and forth between the different costumes so that he gets that wing flapping effect. Another thing that is happening on this particular slide, Forest 2, is we move from our walking bear to our angry bear, right? So he's been hidden up into this point, and he appears when he receives the event owl. So what that means is I've got this tool here where you can broadcast, means that when this piece of code gets run, it tells all the other sprites, ow. So what happens at ow? And this is back here in the forest. So after that laser zap, it's broadcasting ow. And all that means is that it's running a program inside of a program. It's telling it to find another piece of code within the entire piece and run that piece of code next. So the broadcast owl that we see here in our happy bee with his pollen tells our bear here to appear when it receives the message owl. Okay, so when it receives the message owl, the bear appears. He growls with our sound here, switches costumes, and then switches costumes, and then switches costumes, and then switches costumes. That could have been a lot easier if I had used a repeat instead of doing this over and over. But what I've done here at the very end is told it to go back to the meadow. So now that we're at this meadow, we see our swarms start to show up. So when the backdrop switches to meadow 2, they appear. They go to the X of -60 and the Y to -1000. Now, I don't have 1,000 pixels there, but what that basically tells us is to move as far off the screen as it's able to do so. And then it's going to wait a second and then move into another position, just like that. So when it glides to that position, it's going to wait another half a second before going off in the other direction. So that's one piece of code that's running while those bees move up. The other piece of code that's running is to make them flap their wings. So you see we've got a repeater of 50 on this one. And that's me simplifying things a little bit so that their wings would continue to flap for the entire duration of the rest of the piece. And because they were going to flap for the entire duration of the piece, you can see at the end of that repeat, I hide them and broadcast the message, the end. So we'll get to that in a second, but just know that when they're done flapping their wings, we're done with the piece. When we run that, it's going to flap their wings until the end. Right. So that one controls the movement. And that one controls the flapping. So you see at the end of this one, it switches the backdrop to forest 3, where we still have our angry bear. And we've told it to go to this position and zoom over to the bear. So when the backdrop switches to forest 3, which is where we are now, we're broadcasting an event, bees, and we're going to this other position. So that's what's happened here. So what do you think happens when they broadcast bees based on the sounds you just heard? So the bear has a shrill scream and the sound of him being stung repeatedly. That's exactly right. When I receive bees, so we're on our angry bear, he's receiving the message bees, and that tells him that he should screech. He should wait 3/4 of a second in time for all the stinging sounds. And then it repeats him bouncing back and forth, being angry. So at the end of that, he growls and broadcasts run. So we're going to have to see what run does here in a second. Let's run that. Okay, so run changes us back to our walking bear. See, we've got a couple of other pieces of code here for this walking bear. When it receives run, we've got another walk cycle. But you'll notice that this walk cycle, instead of waiting 1/4 of a second, we're only waiting 1/10 of a second, and we're moving 30 steps at a time instead of 10 steps at a time. That gives the impression that the bear is running much faster. So a nice, leisurely, relaxed walk through the forest bear at the beginning here, and then I'm getting attacked by bees bear right here when he receives run. So all that we're seeing here with run is this walk cycle on our bear. So what else is happening when run happens? The bees, the swarm here, is also getting an instruction. So they're getting the instruction to fly to that certain position, switch the backdrop to this background, the river, once we get there, and to continue on to the middle where they finish. So all that's still going on, they're still flapping their wings. So run tells this bear to hightail it out, and it tells this swarm to go to a certain position and to change the background. When that background changes, when we get to this background of the wide river, and that is part of the run instruction on our swarm, once we get here, we have another walk cycle that's not quite as fast as the original one because I wanted to give it enough time for him to look like he's going down the hill. And then our splash. So this part here is walking at a diagonal angle down. This is walking in a straight line across the river where we get the splash. And then this is walking at that upwards angle back up the other side of the hill. And then at the very end of this, it broadcasts moral.
The moral is that anger makes bad situations worse.
So that's how I did all of the voices. At the very beginning, we start with play sound B1, which is the first piece of the story. So that's the voiceover that's attached to that. And then page 2, you see when the program is run, this is hidden. When the backdrop switches to the meadow, it shows page 2 copy, which is this, and it also plays the sound in the background. So rather than try to keep the sounds in a piece of code that's as complicated as this, where there's a lot of things happening with the same bear, it's easy to get lost in there. There's a lot going on. So what I've done instead is each of these pieces of text, the copy, have the voiceover pieces. That may have been a lot to digest right off of the bat, right? Oh my God, there's so many things happening. There are sprites and there are costumes and there are backgrounds and some of them can be animated. There's repeating and don't worry about it. The cool thing about this is it's designed for beginners. So when you go to scratch.mit.edu and you're able to play with this on your browser for free, or you're able to download the program to your tablet or phone for free, they walk you through it with tutorials that are absolutely amazing, from all the way to the very beginning of learning where everything goes to making it really, really complicated, like creating video games and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So it's a great tool for animation to create stories, and it's a great tool for interactivity and building up to things like games. And there's no better tool on the computer to give you a creative outlet and the fundamental understanding of what is, in my opinion, the most important thing anyone can be learning right now, and that is code. If you've got the opportunity, if you've got 15 minutes and you don't want to be doom scrolling through anything else online, spend 15 minutes playing around with Scratch and you'll find yourself 3 hours later wondering why you hadn't spent lots more time playing with it. It's 2 thumbs way, way up. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, if any of that seemed overwhelming, or if I went by something too fast, you can always replay this, but what I would recommend is heading over to scratch.mit.edu for yourself, because you'll always figure it out better when you're playing through it. And when you get there, you'll find that they are ready for you, whether you are a beginner or whether you've been playing with Scratch for a long time. The tutorials section here takes you all the way through, from getting started, simple animation, creating a story, starting to use it to create a chase game, a pong game, video game, logic, coding. All of this cool stuff is at your fingertips for free, scratch.mit.edu. And I want to see what you come up with. Send us your projects. Send us what you create, whether you're doing songs and dances and stories or video games or whatever. This is an amazing program that has something to offer, no matter whether you're a little bit on the logical coding side or if you're over here on the creative, expressive side. This is a program for you. You will have fun with it. You will do something awesome with it. I want to see it. Send it to us. Go out, have fun, and we'll see you again soon. Everybody stay safe and stay healthy out there.